Welcome back to another episode of Capes and Tights, a comic book and pop culture podcast. That's Adam. I'm Justin. We're back for another episode to talk. Adam, this is 2022 is crazy. Another DC owned project. This is, I don't know what's going on. I feel like the whole world's going tipsy-turvy over here at the podcast.
It is. And it's good though. We got to bring it in. I mean, and man, this is a good one to use to tip the scales. I mean,
well, the Dark Knight trilogy to me is the same thing as a Peacemaker was. Like, I feel like we didn't do this on purpose. It wasn't like we picked out DC projects because we liked them and want to talk about them. It's more like it just happened to be that this was the first DC project that I picked out when we talked about scheduling out was that, we need to do the Dark Knight trilogy because I think that's a good place to talk about. Peacemaker came up and was like, oh, we really need to talk about this. But I think that this is the good, because I will say right now, as we get into, we'll break down Batman Begins. We'll talk a little bit Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. But I told Taylor on the car over the weekend was, I will say, as a big MCU and Marvel fan and a not so much of a DC fan, The Dark Knight is one of the best comic book movies that's ever been made. I will tell you that right now.
Without a doubt. One of the first things I said to Annie when I walked out is I was like, all movies included, all different publishers. I was like, I don't think just about anything has reached like that level of comic book movie. And so same kind of thing. I was just like, man, and I've seen it probably 8 times in my life. And I still was like, man, that's a really good trilogy.
And Batman Begins. So we could start off with Batman Begins and the trilogy. I called it originally in the notes. It was the Christopher Nolan Batman films. And then I realized that the actual official kind of title of it is the Dark Knight trilogy, because they're all written and directed by Christopher Nolan. I think he had some help by David Goyer on movie 1, and his brother Jonathan helped write movies 2 and 3 in this series. So he did have some help writing it, but Batman Begins, I will say, was starting off at Batman Begins. It wasn't, this time around watching it, I wasn't as big of a fan as I thought I was. Like, when I was talking to people about Batman movies and the new Batman movie that just came out, and people are like, oh my gosh, it's like one of the best Batman movies. And all of people's top 5 Batman movies included Batman Begins. And I liked it. I thought it was a great movie. To me, it missed the mark on, I don't even think it would be in my top 10 favorite. My favorite Batman movies, obviously, because there's only been like 10, but like top 5 favorite comic book movies, top 10. I mean, it wouldn't be in there. Batman Begins is good. It was, but on a scale of it being nearly 20 years after the last Batman movie, to me, it didn't reach the level that I wanted it to reach, but it was good.
It wasn't. And maybe you had the same thing I did, where what I realized was I haven't actually seen Batman Begins the whole way through in a long time. I've seen Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises so many times that, like, when I started watching Dark Knight Rises, I was like, maybe I haven't seen this one. And then I was like, oh my God, I've seen this like 12 times. But Batman Begins, I was like, right away, I was kind of like, oh, I forgot that detail. Detail. And when it ended, I was like, man, maybe this trilogy is like not as good as I thought it
Which happens. I mean, it's 2005 was when this movie came out. So you're talking, it's been 17 years since the movie came out. So things change. It's for a 17-year-old movie. It was made pretty well. Like, you look at the movie, you wouldn't think that it was made in the early 2000s. You think that it's using technology of nowadays. The one thing I noticed, Adam, is it was made for $150 million. It only made $373.7 million.
That's crazy.
Think about the fact that it was 20 years after the first or the last Batman movie. And Batman is a product that's biggest. Like, if you talk about, people say, name a superhero. 1 out of 5 people is gonna, or of the 5 people that are, let me phrase this right, the 5 top characters of all time are going to include Batman.
And every time.
The fact that, like I said, we just talked, or we will talk, actually, should say this now, because that episode was recorded last week, but it won't release until May. We talked episode 1 from Star Wars and how it made like $1 billion. And one of the main reasons was it was the first Star Wars movie in like 15, 16 years. So that makes sense to me. But 20 years since the last Batman movie, it can't even make more than $500 million. I understand it's early 2000s. So like ticket prices are a little less and all that stuff. But it just baffled me, especially when we get to movies 2 and 3 in this series and how much more the movie's made than the first movie. It just was very, 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 very surprising that it made $373.7 million on a Batman movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
It starred Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Liam Neeson, Katie Holmes, Gary Oldman, Cillian Murphy, Tom Wilkinson, Rutger Hauer, Ken Wannabe, and Morgan Freeman. I want to talk a little bit of Christian Bale, dude, because when I was growing up, Christian Bale to me was from a movie called Newsies. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. It's a musical about delivering newspapers, and he was a young baby-faced newspaper delivery person, a newsie. And so when I saw him get cast as Batman, I just started laughing. The young person in me was like, "Oh my god, he's gonna seize the day," which is a song from Newsies. If anybody isn't a Newsies geek like I am, but it was just kind of funny to see that. Did you know that Henry Cavill and Jake Gyllenhaal were also in the running to play Batman? Can you? There's other people too, but no names that I really cared about. Those are the two that I was like, interesting.
Your thing with the Newsies is really funny though, because again, we have that just slight age gap with us, and I'm thinking, no, I totally like would have been shocked if they'd have cast that guy out of Newsies into Batman. And but I'm thinking where that age thing, I remember The Machinist. Do you remember that movie?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so like I had seen that one. And so I was kind of like, all right, he can do a dark role and he can totally do the physical part of it. But that was only because of The Machinist.
And so we'll talk about that while we're here. Are you a fan of Christian Bale as Batman?
It's the definitive Batman to me.
I believe too. He is my Batman. As much as people will say, like, you know, the Michael Keaton is their Batman, and obviously people have Adam West as their Batman. I think Christian Bale was my Batman, and I think he had the fitness to be strong. Like he had that body to be that way, but also the unassuming son of a multi-billionaire family. Kind of like he still had that corporate look that he can go into an office in a 3-piece suit and be recognized as Bruce Wayne. But then also when you see him change and be into a bat suit and see him walk around in a bat suit, you're like, oh, I can see that too. Because like when he's in an office, you see him fully made up in a jacket suit. When he takes his shirt off, he's fit. He hides that well. I feel like it was a very good casting, and I don't think anybody's really was upset by his casting.
No, I mean, I think he was now we look back and we're like, Christian Bale. But I mean, that was a big shift for what Batman had ever been, for sure. But no, I mean, I just think that it's the definitive, and I understand other people's arguments, but it just, to me, it encapsulated so much of the Batman comics that I read then. Like it knew, which stuff you and I talk about a lot with Marvel. It knew what to pull from. Like it had elements of The Killing Joke. It had elements of Nightfall in it. It had elements of the Long Halloween?
Yep.
The famous, and it had, and of course The Dark Knight by Frank Miller. So like, it knew what it wanted to do, but it drew from a lot of sources. So you didn't get that weird vision that's like just Frank Miller. Cause let's all be honest, none of us, that's the problem. You and I don't want any more Frank Miller Batman. And what Bale pulled off was that he was a mix of that. And they also really got to the heart of it with his character with, I think, finally saying, hey dude, Bruce Wayne is the cover.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
he's Batman.
Yes.
So like you said, all around, I think that's why with Christian Bale, it worked so well. It felt realistic. I mean, yeah,
exactly. And I think, so I think some people might have the problem with his Bat voice, which is, I liked. I think it was funny. It was trying to make, because I mean, think about how, if we break away the walls of fake comic book world and say that who in their right mind would think that Superman, by putting on glasses and a suit and going to the office, would look different than Superman. Like you obviously would know that is Clark Kent is Superman. Same thing with Batman. At some point, if you hear someone speak at him, if you were to call me on the phone, I know it's you. I don't have to see you to know it's you. So if you just talk in your normal voice in a bat suit, someone's going to go, Bruce? Like you're going to see that. So the I am Batman it helps. It makes you go, what the hell voice is that, in a sense that you go, I don't even know who that is, but someone's lips, like, it's so funny to see that. And I think we had talked about maybe doing an episode one time is how many different ways you could kill superheroes, the stupid ways. And one of them is the cowl. Like who has not shot Batman in the face? Fuck,
every time, man. And back to your thing about the freaking identity, but like, wear a full face mask, man. Why do you show them your eyes and your mouth? The two things that they're going to recognize. And that's also where they're going to shoot you.
Wow. Blue eyes and those lips look very familiar. And that voice sounds very familiar.
Man.
Do you happen to be Bruce Wayne?
And then of course, people mocking the voice, which is funny too. You're like, right, man. Like it's weird. It makes him sound like he's a crazy person.
Yes.
Oh, wait, that's right. He dresses up like a bat and goes around and fights people at night.
He's a multi-billionaire. It's literally like if Elon Musk went out and started fighting crime.
It is 100% that.
And so like, he's like, I'm a multi-billionaire. I can actually pay people to fight my battles for me. Like I could pay two people $1 million each to fight each other. And I'm still the one that's going to dress up like a freaking bat in the middle of the night and fight crime. It's an absolute asinine idea, but that's the point. We have to sometimes, we mentioned this past, look past this shit to get the actual, it's a comic book movie.
I think the Nolan version did a good job though, because I'm not going to, like, one thing that always used to bug me with like pretty much every TV Batman is, of course, you watch him spending like all his time and money dressing up as this weird little Batman running around punching people when like he could just fix the whole city. He has more money than God. I mean, he could just do whatever he wanted. He could take over the city and run it as, you know, the savior of the city. But no, he chooses to be this weird little Batman. And this movie doesn't pull any, or all of these don't pull any punches with that. Everybody around them is like, okay, this is a really weird way of expressing yourself.
Exactly.
But,
well, I do love it. Also, it's kind of funny to speak on that. Like everybody around him is also can be crazy because the second that like Alfred found out he was Batman, he was like, cool, let's build a cave for you.
Yeah.
Right. When Morgan Freeman found out he was Batman, it's like, cool, let's take it's your gear. It's not mine. I don't own it. You own it. When Rachel found out, she's like, oh, cool. You know, when you stop being Batman, we can be together. It's like, no one was like trying to talk him, like really like trying to, let's get this guy committed. Like, why are we not talking about this guy's mental problems that would happen and make you dress up like a bat in the middle of the night and fight crime? Like, it's funny. So you have to get past that to understand that it's a comic book movie and the whole idea, it's lore, it's not real. And that we have to understand, let's just get past the stuff that would be like, why the hell wouldn't someone just shoot him in the face and get it over with? It's the same thing with the opposite side of it. Why doesn't he just, I know he shouldn't be killing, Batman doesn't kill people, but like, dude, at some point you have to kill the villains that you have because they keep on getting out and keep on hurting people. Like, come on. What I will say is obviously Michael Caine as Alfred was like perfect casting for Alfred. I think
I absolutely favorite.
Michael Caine is
Alfred
one of my favorite characters, actors of all time. Liam Neeson is in this. Again, we're kind of backwards here because we did record episode 1 of Star Wars for the beginning of May last week. So we talked about Liam Neeson obviously on that episode. So look forward to that. But I will say, and I spoke to Paul about this at the comic book shop this week, Galactic Comics, was the Ra's al Ghul stuff is awesome because I feel like we had Batman on TV with Adam West. We had the early 90s Batman movies that really barely like the touch on Ra's al Ghul as its lore of Batman and not touch like this movie diving into that and having been relying a lot on that made me think, okay, this is like DC Comics. Like this is comics made into movies. Absolutely. And I like that stuff and not just focusing fully on, like they could have come out with Batman Begins and come out with Joker immediately. Like
you've said it many times about Iron Man, right? Like, why did they start with Iron Man? Well, like, you know, they slowly built that character up.
Swallowed wrong. And they were able to do that. And speaking of that, is the first 50 minutes of a 140 minutes, so what, 2 hour and 20-minute movie? Yep. The first 50 minutes, he was not Batman. He was Bruce Wayne fighting along and trying to become a new person and so on and so forth, which is what I will always say about the Daredevil series on now Disney Plus, is that the entire first season of Daredevil, he's not Daredevil. Yeah. He's a guy who dresses up in the middle of the night and goes out and fights crime like this, and then eventually gets called Daredevil and eventually has a suit. The same thing with this. The first 50 minutes of the movie, I was watching it and going, okay, he's not called Batman yet. He's not have a suit yet. He's not fighting crime yet. He's just trying to become a better person, and he becomes Batman. And so at half the movie, basically, he's not even Batman yet. Oh. And that really made me speak to the idea of building someone's character and showing you why it's still ambiguous why he has to come back and fight as a bat. That to me is still not fully developed, but it's great to show that like you can build this character. And even to the point where he had like that, with every Spider-Man origin story movie, where he has that using the powers for the first time. Yep. So he has that ability, like when he jumps off the building for the first time,
exactly,
and hits the scaffolding stuff and like falls off the side of the building. Like that's learning how to use it. He wasn't just immediately like, okay, I know how to use this suit that I paid billions of dollars for.
It's really I remember, which was interesting too, is, because now we have so many comic book movies, but that was actually wild when Batman Begins came out to see the origin story, because in the Keaton ones, which you said were 20 years before, right?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
We didn't see origin story. We saw flashbacks, but not much about like what turned him into who he is. We just kind of jump into the story. And so these movies were kind of bringing the origin story back. It looks like for a while people weren't into it, but man, it works in this movie big time, like you said, because you have to see how this guy becomes somebody that we consider a superhero. I mean, he's just a rich dude.
Right? And there is that talk. We talk about how, again, I'm going to reference a little bit to this episode 1 review that we did. So look forward to that at the beginning of May, is that the episode 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars is a generation's version of Star Wars. The generation prior to that was the original trilogy, and the generation that's out basically now is the sequel trilogy. Is that this is 20 years is a long time to go from Batman to Batman. Yes. This is a generation's Batman. And so there is a part of it who people are going to know that the character Batman exists, but not how Batman became Batman. And so even just rebooting it is basically what they did, is rebooting it with an origin story made a lot of sense to me, because it gave me, person who knows Batman, knows a lot of the stories and villains of Batman, but don't follow Batman. It gave me a little bit more understanding of who Batman is and who Christian Bale's Batman is, which is really good. Did you know the Batcave set was actually a real set? It wasn't CGI. Like the actual, like his Batcave they built was an actual on set built.
No, I didn't. That's cool.
Which is badass. Which is like awesome to think about.
And that's one thing Nolan is great at, is like practical effects and like framing scenes like that. And that's something even we've talked about before as why these stand out. But having that like one director vision shows up so much in these movies. Actually, something you just said about where Batman Begins was kind of shaky. Imagine they'd have just yanked Nolan and put somebody else in and said like, fix it.
Yes.
But it ended up being amazing once you saw the full story resolve. And I'm talking to you, Star Wars, the new movies, where you kept changing all the scripts because
speaking of that, did you see there's like someone on April Fool's posted that someone else is rebooting the sequel trilogy and all this stuff, and Wayne Johnson was doing it all, and like it's obviously a fake. It was a freaking April 1st. Like, don't believe anything that happens on April 1st. Anybody, please. It's annoying. And all these comments, I'm like, oh my god, thank you so much for all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh my god, people, they're not gonna reboot that series. Will you stop it? What I was thinking about with Taylor, my wife, this weekend was we probably will end up with this episode, 100% of this episode, 20% we'll be talking about the Batman Begins, like 60% Dark Knight, and then another 20% Dark Knight Rises, just because like we started at the top of this, that's the best movie that honestly the DC's ever made. And what I don't understand, talking about this whole like one writer, one series, same actors, is where they went away from that. Like this, if you add up all the money that this movies make, so if you add the second two movies made just over $1 billion each, right? So that's $2 billion right there, and then add the $400 million for this one. That's $2.4 billion on a roughly, let's say 300, 450, $500 million in budget. So you're talking a $2 billion, profit or gross profit on a series. Why did they break from that? Like, why all of a sudden did you have Christopher Nolan do 3 movies with the same Christian Bale Batman? They did switch one character, Katie Holmes, who I thought was way better as Rachel in movie 1 than she was like that what's her name was in movie 2.
Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, I honestly thought Katie Holmes was an excellent Rachel, but that's just, it's not a big deal. But why they went away from that? Like all of a sudden I know, now they're doing all these like, we're not going to make anything in continuity. It's all over the place. It's crazy.
And it's fine. I mean, whatever, do that. But my thing is, like you said, that's so like, I really don't like to like invest my time in that as much, because it's not only like a different story, but then it's like, but is the next one going to suck because of this writer or this director? And then, but DC is starting to make an art form out of that though, which is really, I mean,
and here's the deal. So if you don't do it, they are doing better at it seems like they're doing better at let's think a movie like the Batman, I've heard, has been very well reviewed and very well said. We're going to review it when it comes out on digital. Morbius. So if you look at this Marvel side of it and the Sony trying to make movies and Morbius being in the same universe, but not really connecting with other movies in a sense, I've gotten absolutely horrendous reviews. So I understand.
Oh, has it?
Yes, absolutely horrendous. Like, people are like, it's like, they can't figure out what they're doing over there. It's with Marvel, it's MCU or Kevin Feige and his team are not involved direct with the movies. It seems like they just fall off a cliff, and that should be an obvious sign. And honestly, most of us think that all these B movies that made like Morbius and they're going to make a Kraven the Hunter, we're like in our minds like hoping they fail, because Marvel fans will go, well, maybe Sony should just sell the rights back to Marvel and then we could just get over this whole Sony Spider-Verse. But yeah, it just seems like Batman, they're at least doing a good job supposedly with this one-off Batmans that are not connected to any other Batman world or DC world. We'll just do it. It's fine. See how it works. But again, like you said, to me, when I'm going through looking, I mean, you know me, I have thousands of movies. Yep. When I go through and look at those movies, when I'm even watching them, when I'm working behind the scenes, I'm trying to pick out movies that have like, oh, I'll do the Jurassic World thing, because there's like 3 Jurassic Park movies and 2 Jurassic World movies. They're connected. And so me watching I probably won't regularly rewatch movies like, well, I don't know, Wonder Woman has 2 of them, but like Wonder Woman, for an example, like, because of the fact there's not enough to surround it, there's nothing that really feeds into it. And so that's what these movies did. There was 3 movies. I could watch them in succession. They made sense. And then Marvel or Disney DC just decided to be like, we'll do it a different way and not make as much money and not do as well doing this thing. It just baffled me.
Well, and there's just so many ways to even just try to do the continuity. Yeah. That's what gets frustrating with, like, I read that they had offered Christian Bale a 4th appearance, and he just, I think he said it would be too indulgent. Like what he had done, he was happy with. But they could have found a way to keep that storyline. For instance, they could have done like a Dick Grayson to Nightwing to new Batman, and we all would have been like, hell yeah, that's cool. Let's do that.
I mean, you could also do the Marvel thing, which obviously this is slightly before this. So this is also a downside of what Dark Knight has, or the Dark Knight trilogy has, is that the Dark Knight came out just after 2 months after Iron Man came out, the same year Iron Man came out. And so that was the beginning of what we as Marvel fans see as like the beginning of amazingness. So the Dark Knight was their middle movie was right in that spot. So they had not been able to plan. Like, they couldn't plan out of this. So they obviously signed on Christian Bale to do 3 movies, and then they couldn't see what was going to happen. If these movies came out this past year, like if Batman Begins came out 2 years ago, in all likelihood, they would have been connected in more ways.
Right.
Excuse me. Because they could have been like, okay, this is the Batman movies, and then we're going to do 3 Superman movies. And then someone from the Batman movie, some auxiliary character, someone who wasn't really into it, maybe your Morgan Freeman or Alfred even, shows up in all of them. Like, Morgan Freeman could help with like creating tech for everybody. Through Wayne Enterprises. But I just feel like at that time it was not big to do this big, huge world building thing.
And the flip side is maybe it wouldn't have been as kind of great as it was as one complete storyline, because maybe they would have tried to drag it out and then ruined the whole thing. And
good point.
But because it's just, they are so good. They just, like, everything is wrapped up. Like that's rare, I feel like, anymore, for there to be like all of the loose ends tied up.
Yes. Oh, so the other thing is that with the first movie compared to the second 2 movies in this, the villain. So if you look at our graphic, anybody is out there, when you pull this graphic up on your YouTube or on iTunes and Spotify, the graphic I created includes Batman, obviously. It includes Joker and Bane. What is missing out of that is a villain from the first movie. Because if you ask anybody just who hasn't seen the movie in years, tell me who the villain is in the first movie. I don't think anybody's going to remember. I forgot until I saw the movie. That really the villain is obviously Ra's al Ghul, but it's Scarecrow. Scarecrow is, it's just a pretty dope mask, honestly. It freaks me out every time I see him with that mask.
Is fantastic.
But it's funny how forgotten that it's really true. They built a movie based on the origin story of Batman, but it was really Batman versus the evilness of Gotham City. That villain was really the evilness of trying to correct and make his city better. There had to be a few people like Scarecrow and his group and Ra's al Ghul, obviously. But like, it was nice to see that part. I was happy, but it was kind of funny to me. I was like, oh, we put the Batman and who the 3 villains he fights are. And I'm like,
well, when I was putting my comics up behind me, I have I have Bane and I have Joker and like that's Nightfall. And then I was like, and I even thought like, man, what am I going to say if Justin's like, where's Ra's al Ghul? And I was just going to say in the shadows.
Yes.
But
yeah, it's true.
But it is like you. I was kind of like, I got all my comics out and I was like, oh, I didn't even like think of Ra's al Ghul. I just couldn't find Scarecrow.
Yes. Well, that's the thing is, like I said, but I was kind of weirded out by it, but like, there's always a big villain in the movie, isn't there? And then I'm like, I kind of like the idea that it's in the shadows and that Ra's al Ghul was a part of it, but also Scarecrow was a part of it. And also like the city's just evilness of the city was part of it, which was fascinating to me.
Well, say intended or not, it makes the League of Shadows feel kind of like exactly what it's supposed to be, which is like there and not there and big and not big. And,
so and then it sets up the big villain for the next one with the end where the card. I thought that was like, to me, I can just picture myself. If you're in a theater and you're a big Batman fan, and that they say, this guy's been going around the city and leaving these calling cards, I could just picture people in the crowd going, "Oh my god!" and like clapping and like all excited because the Joker was coming. And what we didn't know was how unreal the Joker was. The Heath Ledger as Joker was the best character in any DC movie that's ever been created. I will say he's up there probably as my top 2, top 3, maybe top 4 favorite villains in any superhero comic book related project. It's just sad. Rest in peace. It's sad that we don't get any more of his acting in general, and his acting, not just as Joker, but just his acting in general, because Heath Ledger had a big, strong career ahead of him at 28 when he passed away. He didn't actually even get to see the movie. Did you know that?
I did know that. Only because I saw it in a video I watched. But
it's sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so The Dark Knight was his last movie that he did another movie that released after that too, but not as big as this movie.
Right.
July 18th, 2008. That, like I said, 2 months after. I think it was right around July or May. First week of May is when Iron Man came out, and I believe I was right around the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk movie, came out right around the same time. I looked that up. I think
so.
June 13th. So it was May was Iron Man, June was Incredible Hulk, and the sequel to Batman Begins called The Dark Knight was July. So this is the summer of superhero movies. It was really the big summer that got things where we are now. Man. I don't know if we'd have this podcast if it wasn't for that summer. It was made for $185 million, and again, it brought in just over $1 billion. Crazy. That's fascinating. Almost 3 times as much as the first movie. A little bit longer, 152 minutes. Christopher Nolan again, like I mentioned. So Christian Bale obviously returned, Michael Caine returned, Gary Oldman returned, and then Maggie Gyllenhaal, we mentioned, replaced Katie Holmes as Rachel. Morgan Freeman returned, and then we added Heath Ledger and Aaron Eckhart to the film as well. Hans Zimmer did the music for all of it, which is amazing music, obviously.
The music is fantastic in these movies.
And like I mentioned, it probably, okay, so if I put it up there, I don't want to put it up there yet because I haven't actually thought strong about this, but it's definitely top 5 superhero movies or comic book related movies of all time is The Dark Knight.
It's one of the very few I think was like really truly like Oscar nod worthy. And
that was the beginning of it, wasn't it? Wasn't it right around that time where they're like, we have to start, like, this was so good that you have to add this. So they started going from the 5 movies to 10 movies, and right around the Dark Knight time, which was like, these are the movies. Like, it's almost like they wanted to add it as the 11th movie because they're like, this movie is so good, but no one's going to get it credit because it's a Batman movie. But yeah, and speaking of that, Heath Ledger, freaking insane performance, like I mentioned. Quickly, I say quickly, this is going to take me a second.
Oh yeah.
He won, and this is not the critic awards. He also had many film critic awards, just the regular awards. Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards. He won Best International Actor at the Australian Film Institute Awards. Again, and these are all supporting, so I'm not going to go over every one of them, but Best Supporting in the British Academy Film Awards, the Golden Globes, the People's Choice Awards, the Saturn Awards, the Scream Awards, and the Screen Actors Guild Awards. He also won Best On-Screen Matchup and Best Ensemble of Cast, and then the other Film Critic Awards for his acting as Joker, which to me, like I mentioned, I was talking to my wife about it, is the best Joker also. Yep. So I think the Dark Knight trilogy gives us my favorite Batman of all time, and it gives me my favorite Joker of all time. Sorry to anybody who loves the 90s Joker or anybody who loves animated Jokers or anything like that, or people who are crazy like my wife who likes Jared Leto as Joker.
She's our chaos Muppet there. She's got the Jared Leto Joker, man.
Yes. Like, I don't understand it.
But I'm with you. Like, it is. I mean, Jack Nicholson, man, I love Jack Nicholson's Joker, but it's not even like.
Well, if you bring the animatedness of a drawn comic book character to film, like, I feel like what we've seen in the comic books up until that point, and even past that point for some comic books, Jack's Joker looks like it came out of a comic book, which is great. I have no issue with that. He's still mentally unstable. He has all that thing, but I feel like in the modern day, in the post 2000s day, that if a Joker was real, I feel like Joker, the way he does it is the way he would do it. The actual scars to make the smile, the crazy hair, the way of talking, the absolute, like, you don't know which way this guy's gonna walk on the street. He's gonna all of a sudden nowhere just shot left, and that's who Joker would be.
I've always thought it's fascinating with this Joker, and I think it's one of the things people debate about with this movie. He so clearly, to me, is a war vet. Like, he knows how to use insane kinds of weaponry. He has insane, like, battle prowess, like, managing a situation. And I just feel like, and if you especially look at the, partner that with the time this movie comes out, which is and a whole nother thing we could get into in this movie. This is, not too long after 9/11. Clearly the fears in this movie are this, like, rising police state. What about vigilantism? What about black ops? How do we justify these things? But, like, anyways, I could go off on that tangent all day long with the 9/11 references in this movie.
And because I want to mention at least two also at some point, if I forget, I want to write down a note, is my love for Marvel is because it's based in real world, or based in the real world. Whereas, DC things are based in fake cities that are based off of real cities. But I want to mention that. So I forgot to mention this. The movie got 8 Oscar nominations, which broke the record for most nominations for a movie based on a comic book, which was previously held by Dick Tracy, which is funny. So the last person was Dick Tracy. Seems like it wouldn't be that hard to beat Dick Tracy because that movie was questionable in the first place. But I still loved it as a kid, but, like, it's questionable as a first place. Me too. Speaking his performance as Joker, though, like, you could tell he dedicated his time and effort to it. You talked about he stayed in hotels and got into character, and just the much as that Christian Bale put into the effort of being in The Machinist, about losing all that weight and doing all that stuff to get into a role. I think Heath Ledger did the same thing for this Joker. He was going to be the best Joker. He wanted to be the best Joker of ever, and he did it. And the opening sequence of this movie is not only a thing. I think this is a top 5 favorite superhero movies of all time. This is probably this honestly might be, 15 minutes of my favorite movie of all time. Like, the sequence of them robbing the bank.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And the shooting each other. Like, I'm supposed to shoot the person. And in the end, it's just him. It's like, I could watch that scene over and over again. And speaking of that, Adam, did you know that was treated a lot like when we talk Star Wars, when we get to that point, that people used to go see the movie trailer to Star Wars Episode 1. They bought a ticket, went in and saw that. The same similar thing happened to this movie, because in the trailer, they didn't show a trailer. There's actually times in the theater where they showed that entire scene in movie theaters pre the movie, and people went to see the beginning of the movie elsewhere. It's fascinating that people would do that. I feel like I would, but now with the internet, it's like,
exactly.
I feel like they could just have a paywall and put $5 in here and people would watch it. They would make millions of dollars just off of people paying $5 to see 5 minutes of a movie. But I think, not to pull, like, obviously we're going to talk a lot about Heath Ledger, his character, but I think that made everybody else's acting better in having to deal with this character of Joker and him and his team, his group of people around it. And I honestly don't even remember writing that many notes down because of the fact that I was so entrenched on watching the movie. Like, I just wanted to watch the movie and talk, like, oh my gosh, I can't be distracted by anything, that I probably should have watched the movie again and wrote notes down, because I was just so enamored with, I could watch Heath Ledger be Joker for hours. Like a spin-off series on HBO Max, if he was around still, that would have been freaking amazing. Just about how Joker became Joker, and seeing him go from, like, him in Brothers Grimm to him as Joker, like the neat, clean kind of person, to him with the scars and the ratty hair. Like, oh God, Adam, I could just gush over. I want to marry the Joker. No,
no,
is that too far?
You can't marry the Joker. What would Taylor think about that?
I know, because she would want me to marry Jared Leto. Like, what the hell?
Oh, see, that's what happens, man. That's how all these stories happen. Is you're like, fine, I'll marry the Joker, and it turns out it's the Leto Joker.
Oh God,
that's the
twist. Be even worse. Yeah, it could be even worse than that, right? Speaking of Jokers in the Star Wars connection, doesn't our boy Luke Skywalker play the voice of Joker in a bunch of animated films too? Yep. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like the quotes that come out of this movie. Want to make a pencil? Do you want to see a pencil disappear?
Oh, that's one of the best scenes.
Let's put a smile on that face. Yep. Like those kind of things, just like, I don't know. Yep. But if you were to point and put Joker in a movie, I don't think they could have done it any better than this movie, because of the way that, again, it wasn't silly. It was serious. Right. He had jokes and things that are stupid, but like, it was a serious threat to Batman and the city of Gotham with this crazy person. It wasn't over. Like, if you would have put Jack Nicholson's Joker in this movie, it would have seemed silly.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I mean, that's the weird evolution. Is kind of like everybody had the TV Joker, which was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the Nicholson, who's ridiculous, but all of a sudden, like, very cruel. And then we get this one who's like, this is like the full-on chaos Joker, which is, you know, what Joker always is. So, but yeah, I think that weird evolution is like in Heath Ledger, it's kind of like, man, you see what the Joker would be like with all the like actual funny stuff stripped away.
And it's fascinating too. It's something I would like to talk eventually about with even with you and Paul and stuff, is why comic book movies like Dark Knight and Batman, you know, all these different things, and the current MCU and all those things don't partner more with the people who make their comic books and come out with things around the same time. So like, you know, 2020 was the first time in 45 years that Joker got his own comic book.
Man. Yeah.
And this movie came out in 2008. You don't think that the success of Heath Ledger's Joker in this movie would have been like, okay, guys, let's go. And they could have made him look more like a darker, grittier. As much as I've said, I don't like that part of these kind of movies, is that like, if you were going to make a darker, grittier Joker, this is the way to make him. They could have made a comic book. It wasn't until 2020 that they gave him his own book again.
Yep.
It was a full, I think, a ongoing series. I think they've had like The Killing Joke and all those things that had come out in the meantime. But like, yeah, I just read an article this morning about it was on Polygon, that the Joker gets his own comic book series the first time in 45 years. It's crazy. I would love to see, I don't know, this again, here you go, just a little note. I don't read DC Comics, so I don't want to like get vilified for saying something that's already created, but I would love to see the whole Elektra is now Daredevil in the Marvel universe. The whole, at some point, Joker becomes Batman.
I'm like you. I feel like that certainly has happened at some point. That just sounds like
it would just be funny to see the villain become the hero in a small little like twisted world. Even if it's a multiverse thing where it's like Joker actually becomes Batman and Christian Bale or Bruce Wayne is the Joker, would be amazing.
Well, and that's the, I think we've joked before that there's the people who have their theory that like Joker's power is that he knows he's a character in a comic book.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and he's just self-aware of, and man, you could play with that in film like so much about it being like a Joker that knows he's in movies and knows he's in popular culture.
And that's what they could have put that as a, like, after Deadpool got the success, like you could have seen that in more recent movies and TV shows with Joker being more breaking the fourth wall and doing that kind of stuff too. But like you mentioned, we were talking, have you, so I don't know if we're going to do Moon Knight at some point. I don't know. Have you seen the first episode of Moon Knight yet, Adam?
I have. And
so we don't want to do any spoilers on that at all. We'll do our review, but they deal with mental illness, and they deal with a character that is a hero of sorts that at least the anti-hero, at least a vigilante in that sense, that has mental illness, but it's usually the villain is the one with mental illness and so on and so forth. But the Joker has a mental, there's no way he doesn't have some sort of mental illness, whether PTSD or, whatever it may be, that he has to have that and deal with that. And that he has no superpowers. He has no, you have, obviously every superhero has delayed aging and healing factors and all that crap, because that's what they have to do to make the comic book characters last forever. But his powers, but he's also smart. So we've talked about how we're not huge Donald Trump fans, but the fact that he has to have some sort of smartness, or at least people around him to be smart, to deceive and do what he does as people. And it's like, you know, same with Joker. Like he's crazy, but he also has critical thinking in parts of makes it so he can do what he does. It's crazy.
Which was, I mean, a brilliant way to play Joker. And we're getting to it in a minute. And we can say that, like, if you read the comics, like, there's not a lot of dumb characters that come up against Batman. That's kind of the whole thing. There's a mental game always, because they're all crazy. And so I think that, anyways, I'm losing my train of thought on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. So Ledger passed away sadly in the middle of this film, or right after this film. So it made it difficult, I said, to actually promote the film, because it was like, go see this movie where this person is now dead. And it would have been, it's different also with someone like, even it's not that much different, but it's honestly going to be hard for them to promote Black Panther 2 with
without a doubt,
Boseman dying. And so it's a little bit different if someone gets, I guess, murdered or I don't know, the way someone dies, maybe how young he was. I mean, if Morgan Freeman would have died after filming a movie, or like someone else that's really old died after filming the movie, it's like, they passed away. It's whatever. But like, this person died of an accidental overdose at the age of 28.
And I was going to say, and I think that too was like what got it as a product of its time was, you know, all of the pharmaceutical epidemics were like exploding. And then people, you know, remember, like we have Dungeons and Dragons, people were like, did he play this role and it made him like, you know, kill himself or whatever. And I think it kind of got that paranoia built around it a little bit, and that didn't help.
No. So the names that were up for Joker before or at the same time as Heath Ledger, and Nolan says that he wanted Heath Ledger from the beginning. He's been wanted to work with the actor for a while, and he thought he'd be great at him, was Paul Bettany. So would we have ever gotten the Vision as Paul Bettany?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for this. Steve Carell.
Oh, God.
And Adrian Brody. Now, I can see Adrian Brody.
Yeah.
He has that kind of like way about him, and his face is, I hate to say this, made fun of someone's face, but like it just has this weirdness to it that he could potentially act a little off the wall. Steve Carell would have been, he would have had to play a stupid person, like 40-year-old virgin style.
That would have never worked.
No, not the same style, at least, especially that way it is. Yeah, no. You saw the Adam Project? No, not yet.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. So the original, that movie is with what the hell's his name? Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
He's in it, and he has a lot of like clean Deadpool kind of humor in it. So it's like, you know, it's Ryan Reynolds joking around. Well, that movie was supposed to be made 10 years ago, and the actor attached to the movie was Tom Cruise.
Oh, boy.
And I was just like, they definitely would have been a different movie. And same thing with Steve Carell in this movie would have been a different movie.
I'm going to have to wrap my head around that for a while.
Well, just the same thing with all these different people who wanted, I mean, you know, what was it? Michael Jackson tried to buy Marvel back in the day because he wanted to be Spider-Man. Can you imagine a Michael Jackson Spider-Man movie? He would have moonwalked a lot in his Spider-Man outfit. But yeah, so Nolan said that Heath Ledger was his pick from the beginning, and then Ledger sadly passed away. But while it was affirmed that Ledger's return was supposed to happen in Dark Knight Rises, legitimately had its plans, and Nolan declined to recast Heath Ledger's character after his death and change the entire movie's plot instead. Which again, it's the same thing I think they're dealing with Chadwick Boseman and Black Panther 2. We're just like, you could recast, you could nowadays special effects, like would they have, if the way that the special effects are nowadays, would they have still put Joker in this movie, but maybe put him in Arkham Asylum?
Right.
And so you see him that often, and you used voice and imagery from the first movies, or the Dark Knight movies, and affected him in special effects to the point where you had Heath Ledger's character in this movie. Here's the other question about that. Is it ethically okay to do stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. Yeah.
You don't have the permission of Heath Ledger. You'd have had his estate have a say, and they're making the decision based on a person's decision to do that. And so the decision not to recast Joker and to just basically say, okay, he was the villain, the big bad in that movie, and that they didn't even touch on it basically in the last movie, which is good. So that basically he just is missing now. And it was assumed that he was alive, and it was assumed that he was still going to be a villain. But obviously they couldn't do that in Dark Knight Rises.
And the brilliance of these movies is, I mean, maybe he just I mean, that's the Joker, right? He showed up, he did this like chaotic, horrible thing. And the last we see of him is he's walking off dressed up like a nurse. Like, I mean, that's such a brilliant like narrative ending. I mean, I would have rather that, of course, we have Heath Ledger and could have had him in the third movie, but brilliant.
That scene, by the way,
oh my God,
of him in the nurse's outfit walking away from the building and then hitting the button was pretty funny. It has that humor that's not like slapstick funny, but like the simple humor that you have to like, I got it kind of funny. And it also reminded me of the episode or the cover of Blink-182's album with the nurse in the front of it. So that was kind of funny to me. I didn't know if that was maybe a little nod to that album cover.
It could be.
It's kind of funny. Dark Knight Rises came out 4 years later, Adam. That was a long time, honestly, for between movies, but maybe that had to do with the fact that Heath Ledger died. That could have been the rewriting process, the selling it back to the company to figure that out. It was made for $100 million more than Dark Knight was made for. Made it $1 billion again, almost $1.1 billion. Was 2 hours and 45 minutes long.
And
Adam, you know my stance on movies that long.
It's definitely its biggest weakness. And I remember at the time people being like, holy crap. I mean, it is. Yes. It's even rewatching it. There could have been some edits.
Yes, big time. I think it just like it's this pacing thing. It's a pacing thing that we felt that like other movies, the pace in Spider-Man No Way Home was good. I think the pacing was good. I don't didn't need to be worried about making it faster. You had a lot of things going on in that movie. This movie, there was a lot of things going on, but there really wasn't a lot of things going on. I also feel like the fact that it took way too long to get to Bane. Remember I mentioned the first movie was 50 minutes before he became Batman. It was 40 minutes before Bane was actually even introduced into the movie. And so it's like that part was like introduced. Like he actually became like every other shot was him. But yeah, so it was a little too long. Christian Bale returned, Morgan Freeman returned, Gary Oldman returned, Michael Caine returned. We added Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. We added Marion Cotillard. I don't know how to say her name. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which I love him. I love him as an actor.
I do too.
And we added Tom Hardy, which I forgot, Adam. I was talking to Paul at the comic book shop, and I kept on referencing that Tom Hardy is signing at the CGC company for $400 an item, which I thought was like, oh my God, a comic book company. So Tom Hardy has never been in a comic book. He's never written a comic book. And so you have to send a comic book in to get signed by. And I kept on saying, Venom. And Paul goes, he was also Bane. I go, what? Like, no way. And then I saw him and I was like, oh my God, Tom Hardy was Bane. That's so weird. I liked him as Bane. I thought his character is Bane, and this is where you're going to subtract me from the actual DC Comics fan and be just a movie fan.
Sure.
Is obviously he looked different in the movie than he does in the comic books. He got more of a, I feel like it's like a Nacho Libre mask in the comic books where it's just a full hood. I mean, he has that breathing apparatus in the front, which is giving him gas to help because of the pain from being beat up, as you find out at the end of the movie in the escape of the prison that Ra's al Ghul, the Dark League of Shadows and all that stuff puts him in.
Right.
I love this voice. People are going to make fun of his voice.
I'm glad you said, and I actually wrote that in my notes because I was like, that was everybody's freak out was his voice. And part of me that thought that was so brilliant about it is, did you not notice every other weird person running around is changing their voice? Everybody. I mean, like, you can't say he's weird after Christian Bale has been going, I want you to tell me where he is.
And then for no reason. At least you can say the reason why his voice has changed is because of the thing he's wearing on his mouth.
Right. And because
like Darth Vader talks the way Darth Vader talks because he has a helmet on.
Well, and accent wise, I mean, God knows who raised him in that pit of hell for his entire life. I mean, he probably speaks 14 languages. It's the League of Shadows prison.
Like, I did see online, Adam, though. It says someone goes, one of the most recognizable mouths in Hollywood was covered up by a piece of machinery because Tom Hardy has the kind of messed up mouth, and you know it's Tom Hardy, and he covered his face up with that thing. And like I said, I completely forgot that he was Bane because of this apparatus on his face. I did read online too that Bane's voice was originally supposed to be much more distorted. It was actually filmed. The entire film was filmed basically with a distorted like facial, like almost like a Darth Vader distortion to it, and people couldn't understand what he was saying at some first screenings, and so they had to go back and he has to voice act basically over all of those and not distort them, which I like.
Yeah. I mean, to respond to what you said about like you being like watching the films and like I can say confidently, I was obsessed with Nightfall when I was younger. Obsessed with. I mean, I've got one of them on the wall behind me here, and I think it's an excellent Bane, and I think that's where Christopher Nolan did a great job, because the Bane of the comic books would have been like a freaking clown in that movie in its world. I mean, we can talk briefly about the previous Bane that existed in the Batman movies, but mostly we all like to forget about that. The horrible, weird, like foam bicep Bane. But like, honestly, that was not quite, I mean, the Bane in the comics was smart, unlike that weird foam one, but he did look like that. He was goofy. He had some, he had venom being injected into his veins that made him super strong. I mean, it would never have worked.
No. And I think that the benefit I give to Christopher Nolan in this thing is, as a peripheral Batman fan and a peripheral DC Comics fan, someone who doesn't know a lot about it and maybe has seen the movies in the 90s way long time ago in the 90s, is Bane was an unknown character as much to me as it was to a lot of other people. Just like having Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul in the first movie, putting Bane in the last movie made me go, okay, he was able to play with a toy that not a lot of other people have played with yet. I mean, because you could easily have said that he was going to use the Penguin or the Riddler, or you could have used another one of the most famous Batman villains of all time, and he ended up choosing to go with Bane, which made a little bit more sense to me, and was able to do Hollywoodize him and use that mask thing and do make it more like, he doesn't have to wear another face mask. Like it added another thing. We have Batman with the cowl, you have Joker with his face paint, and you have Bane with his mechanical mask thing. That, again, to me, played a little bit of a nod to Darth Vader in that aspect of it. Changed his voice, and it was necessary for him to survive. Not sure why it needed to go over like the whole thing, but like, that's nitpicking at that point.
No, I mean, I thought the choice of villains throughout the whole trilogy was just like, was so well done, well done, because I mean, Penguin would have been kind of weird. I mean, Mr. Freeze would have been just ridiculous. And Poison Ivy, like, how would you explained that? And
I mean, the one thing I would say is that it's very masculine. The three movies. I mean, you do have Catwoman in there, but like Catwoman plays like a very weird role in this movie. And I do like Anne Hathaway as an actress, and I do think that she didn't do a bad job in this movie. I just felt like it also, not that it wasn't necessary for her to be in there, because obviously a lot of this, like the movie went forward with her help. But having a strong female villain would have been a bad idea. Maybe if they made a fourth film, it could have featured a couple of more characters in that movie, like a Poison Ivy or a Penguin.
Now, see, like Poison Ivy could have worked. I mean, they could have just done someone who's really good at making poisons from plants and not controlling plants. But that's why I thought Bane was so well done, because, I mean, he was basically what he was in the comics, just without super strength, which he never needed anyways.
And Nolan purposely didn't give you a backstory to Joker in The Dark Knight because of the fact that he felt like he didn't need to, that it felt like it's just another crazy dude. And it honestly could have been, at this time, if this movie was made in 2018, there likely would have been a Joker spinoff movie, unlike the one that Joaquin Phoenix did, a Joker spinoff movie that literally was like the beginning of how Joker became Joker, which would probably sold $1 billion and done really well. But what I missed was they really didn't show how Catwoman became Catwoman. Like,
at all.
It just basically all of a sudden I know where there's a person running around, and then he wasn't surprised about it. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, there's another person that's dressing like a cat. It just was weird. That to me didn't sit well with me. I do think that Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, if I had to put them in order of ranking. To me, I do think Batman Rises was better than Batman Begins, and that may just because we get to see Batman be Batman.
Oh yeah,
like he gets to save the world. I do love it. Speaking of Catwoman, when Selena Kyle, which is her name in the movie, Batman turns around and looks the other way, and then she disappears, and he goes, "So that's what that feels like." I was like, that is perfect. So that's the humor again that I think that every comic book movie should have, is that slight humor. It makes a joke, but it's not to the point where everybody's like, it's like, oh, that's funny. I guess it doesn't make sense.
You're 100% spot on. And I think that, we tie back some things we've talked about before. I was just writing it down a minute ago. Like, these movies should have ended the Dark Knight phase of Batman. And now we just go back to Batman. He can be more fun again. He can be young. He can have sidekicks that are plucky and funny. And that's what, like, we've said it a million times, but like, don't keep leaning on this really dark Batman, because it doesn't go well for him in this trilogy. If you watch it, it kind of ruins his life.
Yes, absolutely ruins his life. Well, if you look at it, I wish you could see my notes, right? Also, comma, is it always night in Gotham? Yes. I feel like, I mean, I said that note down and I realized that the basically the end of the movie, towards the end of the movie, Dark Knight Rises, is that it's more daytime shots in it where they like the stadium and all that stuff. But I just laughed because I was like, it seems like every scene in this movie, it's dark. In the first two movies, again, everything happens at night. And I don't understand that. Like, why is it always dark?
It's just like bartending, man. But like all those crazy people, when they come out during the day, you're like, whoa. And you could imagine if Batman was just like swinging down the street at like 10 in the morning, dealing with crime, everybody would go, he's not mentally well.
Exactly. And so there's the darkness to it and all of that, but it's funny how that works. It's very dark. It's very gritty. One thing, I'm going to give a big piss off all DC fans and say that they copied Marvel. And Christopher Nolan makes unbelievable movies, by the way. He's not a bad director or writer. 4 years prior to this movie, The Clean Energy Gone Bad was a movie, Iron Man, with the clean energy, the arc reactor. Was put in the stem of the chest of Ironmonger, and he had a big fight and the energy part, the whole idea that they would have self-sustaining energy in this thing, and that's what went bad. I'm like, that's already been done in a comic book movie. You didn't need to do that again. But I understand the whole thing. I like the shots of Bane talking to the football stadium, all that stuff, and the idea that this is a big project. As Batman was flying away, right, with the bomb, and I was like, are we supposed to, like, I'm thinking in my mind, I forgot the end of the movie. Am I supposed to believe that Batman's actually dead? Like, is this what we're supposed to believe? Is the world supposed to believe that Batman's actually dead? And why didn't he drop it and fly away? Like, there's a whole thing of me of and then obviously we find out that he's not actually dead, and that he's actually alive. And then they end the movie with Robin. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, as his real name is Robin. And then we've never gotten anything more from the Dark Knight, like any of these movies. Like, we all go, oh my God, Robin. And then they never did anything with it.
That's why I still feel like if you wanted to do any kind of spiritual successor to this, you still could do Nightwing.
Yes.
Because it could be a direct, like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt being Nightwing, and that branches into a bigger universe. But like, I'm like you, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I think he would be a really, really good Nightwing, man. He would kill it as Nightwing.
We're going to go back with this. We're going to go back to the whole throwing it back is Third Rock from the Sun, Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Exactly. Right.
We talked Newsies already. Now I've got Third Rock from the Sun. Bam. I don't know if we ever going to mention those two shows or movies ever again on this podcast, but there we go. Did it.
Yeah.
I did think it was funny that they went from Gotham as a small city fight crime in the first movie to a little bit bigger going on to a big thing. Giant. It was more like the Battle of New York Avengers style thing in Gotham. Back to the Gotham thing to finish this. We're rolling on here, but to finish this whole thing up, is back to the Gotham thing.
Yes.
About how it being a fake city. What I do give them credit for, and the benefit DC gets over Marvel, is they shot most of that stuff in Chicago.
Yep.
So most of the stuff that Chicago, or the Gotham is shot in Chicago, even though that everybody knows that the idea that Gotham is really New York City, that really it's a play on New York City. The benefit that DC will always get is they can shoot in any city in the country and say that this isn't a back alley in Gotham. Whereas I get pissed off when Marvel does it, where they're like, oh, this is actually Atlanta. Well, just do it in New York City. I know it's expensive, and I know there's things, there's stuff to go around and credits and all that stuff, but it's like you're trying to sell me that this back alley street is actually in New York City when, again, there's no such place as actual Gotham, so it can be in Chicago.
And I was watching one of the making of, and Christopher Nolan, it was crazy. I didn't even, first time I ever watched it, but a lot of the shots of like panned out Gotham, they use like 4 different cities and they mishmash it, and they occasionally like CGI it to change it a bit. But like, I thought that was kind of cool that like you see shots of Pittsburgh, you see shots of New York, you see shots of, I forget, somewhere else, Philadelphia maybe, but
it's like that. I mean, we reviewed and talked and discussed Ghostbusters. A lot of those filmed in Calgary, Alberta, and it's fine. There's no, like, Ghostbusters is based in New York City, but there's no actual lower, like, They had anywhere with the field is a field. You can't tell a difference between a field. There are some buildings where like, that's not in New York City. I've been to New York City. It's not. And so Gotham, again, they had that benefit of being able to be anywhere and make the city whatever you want. You don't have to deal with the Twin Towers coming down because they won't. The Twin Towers don't exist in Gotham in a sense. So all that stuff is as a benefit, in my opinion, to have it be Gotham. Otherwise, that's the reason why I like Marvel more, is because I'm going to go to New York City hopefully this summer, and I'm going to be able to go where Spider-Man lives. Where
there you go,
Daredevil lives. Whereas I can never, ever, ever, ever go to Gotham. It's not possible because Gotham doesn't exist.
You can go to Gotham in your mind.
I know.
But which is kind of fitting though, because everything just seems psychological and dark with like Gotham. So like Gotham's just your depression.
It baffles me that a city that big has that much crime and problems, and no one else has come. No other cities. No other government, big federal government is coming to help. Like the city is just like on its own.
I feel like, and we certainly don't have Superman.
No, like
he lets Gotham get taken over by like some crazy cult. Like,
well, that's the thing that people are like. Oh, one of the biggest faults to Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff is they have made this world so big that when a bigger size problem happens to one of the characters, where are the rest of the Avengers? And I feel like that's the same thing. Gotham gets walled off to the point where no one's allowed to leave this island of Gotham, and like no other superhero comes to help this person. Like no one out there is there. So we're led to believe in these Batman movies that they're the only Batman is the only superhero, and which is fine if that's the case. But I do think we got 3 of the better DC movies over the past 30 years, and that's the end of it. We're supposed to move on. The movies are all, I mean, Dark Knight Rises is like a 9.6 on IMDb.
Oh yeah.
And so like the fact that movie was so well done, and then they didn't take what they learned from these movies to make the other movies is fascinating to me.
Yep.
And that's going to be my only, we didn't do a lot of shitting on DC. I think we talked pretty highly about DC on these movies, in my opinion.
Oh, I mean, like I said, I think they're genuinely, they were as good as all the awards or the Dark Knight was as good as all of the awards it got. I mean, there would be really no Dark Knight if it wasn't for Batman Begins, because we would
So there is that aspect of it, and then I think Dark Knight Rises gets credit for being able to change the entire story of what Christopher Nolan had planned because of the death of Heath Ledger, to now make a movie that was actually sustainable.
And did it really well. I mean, like it totally still feels like Batman. Like I said, if you grew up in that era of like the Nightfall and Bane, and it brings in a lot of those elements that were just so fun about those comics.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, it's just sad because they basically they teased more in a sense by saying Robin's name was Robin, and they teased more. And the whole conversation they had in the alleyway that said you need to cover your face up because it's not to protect you, it's to protect your loved ones, was the idea that Robin wears the little mask. Like the whole idea, like we could have a Robin movie at some point with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which I love, and it never went any further than the end of that movie. It just basically dropped off a cliff, and there's a number of things and factors that go into that. But like, that's my biggest gripe, is that nowadays Christian Bale and all these characters would have been signed on for fucking 6 films. They wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been a single film. Or
you would get the, like, you know, he comes back to reprise the role to train the new Batman, and we get to see him. But yeah, like I said, in the end, I feel like I kind of like these 3 movies alone as they are.
And there's nothing that can solace can soil them.
Exactly. I feel like it's like I can say that those were great and nobody can screw them up now.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I would love Christian Bale to reprise his role in some sort of multiverse DC thing at some point. But like, again, like you mentioned, now we have these 3 films that are, you know, not perfect because they're not perfect films, but they're as close to perfect DC films as you can get. Yep. And again, Dark Knight is one of the greatest superhero movies that have ever been created.
Without a doubt.
The opening scene is one of the best scenes in a superhero movie. Yeah. And this is coming from a massive DC or Marvel fan that doesn't really read DC. So I did start reading DC this week, Adam, though.
Oh man.
A DC Black Label. So Black Label is the non-continuity, non-canon section of it. Gotcha. James Tynion, the 4th, has a book called The Nice House on the Lake.
Cool. There's
7 issues out right now. It's a post-apocalyptic style book that has no superheroes in it. But I do own now a DC comic book.
Hey, so, like you said, they make great stuff. It's just that they're not quite there on the film yet.
Yes. Oh yeah, and that's the thing is I can't complain about the comic books because I don't read them.
Right.
I have seen the movies, and I can tell you that I don't like them.
Yep.
this is the anomaly, in my opinion. We will get to the Batman in the future, the new movie, and we'll talk about that. And then maybe one of these days we'll talk other, maybe we'll do a Batman v Superman.
Sure. Episode. I mean, we should go watch the Keaton Batmans.
Yeah, that would be fun. I did talk about that, and that would be a fun one to do, is the Keaton Batmans. Yeah. I just sorry to say, but I cannot get myself to watch Adam West's Batman because I just feel like it's not. I'm aged out of that. I can't do that. So I'm too young.
Keaton Batman would be fun because we could talk about how that is like the culmination of the 80s Batman, which is so different.
They even released a comic book called Batman 1989 or Batman 89 based off of the fact that Keaton's Batman was like the epitome of Batman up until Christian Bale.
Yeah.
But that's the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm happy about it. I'll watch it again. It will always be on my list. I mean, even my wife, who doesn't really like Batman that much, was very, very surprised as she was watching The Dark Knight Rises with me, that she was like, wow, this movie's not that bad. I'm like, see, it's actually not that bad. I will agree with that. So
totally. Like I said, I've seen them. Every time I'm like, oh, I've seen these like 10 times and I still like them. So that's my review is.
And if they were re-releasing them back in the theaters, if they ever put Dark Knight Rises back in the theaters, or Dark Knight, I should say, it's a buy a ticket again, go see that movie. Oh, absolutely. I think the rumbling and the thing in the big screen, it could be a huge thing for you. Yep. If you're in the Bangor area and you want to watch all three of them, go to Queen City Cinema Club, because you can watch it on the big screen there, order some food, get some drinks, and watch the Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight trilogy there. But yeah, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. That's all I can say. Twitter, Apple, Spotify, all those things. I am Batman.